My spirituality feels like interval training.
My spirituality comes from within.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends, you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
I'll take the red pill, please.
No one's mindset is 2020.
You better watch out. You better not cry. You better not pout. I'm telling you why. 'Cause Jesus is coming back.
Fuck David.
Welcome back to the Epoch Podcast, your weekly dose of mental foreplay. I'm Matt.
I'm Jen.
I'm awesome.
I'm Kat.
Christina.
David.
And this week, we are talking about our personal spiritual journeys. Speaking clearly for myself here, I guess the only person I can speak for in a personal journey. It's not been a linear track. It has been up and down and exponential at times. Like I said in my intro, it feels like interval training where I'm sprinting and then I'm walking, and it's not always intentional though. It's just it has to do with a hunger, and then just getting that fire hose of spiritual intake, and then trying to consolidate that and make it work. I don't know. What are your guys' spiritual histories look like?
I think one thing that's worth mentioning for this community, so we've done, we've been together, in different ways, shapes, and forms for 4 years?
Yeah.
You think? I think in it, some of us longer, some of us shorter, but just on average. And so the journey for us largely started as a spiritual journey. I know Kat and I and the Rainies, we all met at church, and then through a conference, Spirit and Truth in 2016, we met David and Christina. So it has been largely the main filter for our community, and I think as with so many spiritual communities, it's kind of nice to go beyond that particular discussion and build relationships in other ways. Obviously, we're now business partners. We're doing episodes on all sorts of other thoughts outside of just spirituality and whatnot. But I think for me, it's important for the audience to realize that this community really started there and is kind of centered around this core identity. I think a lot of communities don't realize. I think in some ways, for me, I take for granted that everything is spiritual. Mm-hmm. So it's really easy to forget that this episode or this podcast could indeed be a unique insight into us as people, because of just, like I said, everything is spiritual. So that alone makes it something that I think a lot of people, at least in my experience, a lot of people don't view life that way. So that alone is an overarching kind of heartbeat of this community that I know for me has made it very precious and a lot of fun and significantly more serious than just some random little side business project.
I think one of the interesting things that you bring up there is that everything is spiritual, yet it's almost taboo to talk about spirituality or specifically religion. It's kind of, people say that you're not supposed to talk about that in politics because people get so heated and irrational about it. And so it kind of gets pushed off, but in reality, it's woven through everything.
Definitely. Well, and I find when I'm living day to day and I'm interacting with people on the regular, and I will bring up like, oh, well, sometimes your mental health is tied to what you believe, and you have a choice to be happy or to be sad. And I get this look like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. Like, there is no choice. This is how my body works. Like, this is how I function. I'm like, well, there's another way. So, slowly dropping in those little nuggets of those things. So, yeah.
Oh, tell us about private school, yo.
Yeah, so I went to a Christian school from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, Lutheran, non-denominational, and then I went to a Baptist high school where women were not allowed to wear pants, and we belong in the kitchen and then walk around and lift heavy things. I was also not allowed to walk in the grass because my principal was a former drill sergeant person from the Marine.
That sounds so fun.
Instructor, but yeah.
Actually, he was very instrumental in my upbringing and in a positive way, actually, too. I've always had this really strong sense of do the right thing even when no one's looking. I'm like, I must do the right thing. And I sometimes I'd have points and thought process in my life, like, why do I have this strong, I have to go to church. No one else in my family is going to church, but I have to go to church. I have to do these things. Even my brain is like, no, you don't have to. But I'm like, something inside me is like, you're doing it. And so that's kind of been how I've gone through life. I got to a point where I was just like, what do I want in life? And I wanted to marry a good, godly man and have children.
What happened? What did you do?
Well, I'll let him speak for himself on that one.
That's the wrong answer.
Matt's awesome. I love you.
Nice recovery.
But that's what I wanted. And so I went to a church where I knew that's where they were pretty famous for having lots of good godly guys. So
Nice.
The meat market.
Where's the sausage factory church at?
Well, it all and that's part of recovering. Maybe we'll cut all this out and just not go with it.
No, leave it.
But
It's
part of
gold.
thank you. But it's true. I think from my upbringing, men were brought into father figures, or my mom would find guys at the bar. And so my thought was, the bar is not a good place to find a man, a mate. You go to a place that you're going to have common values and common beliefs. And so hence I went to a church where I knew there would be hopefully good men there that had common values with me and beliefs, and I would be able to, I'm not going to go to a Mormon church because I don't believe in Mormon beliefs, those kind of things. So that was the motivation to get to that particular church. Anyways.
Found yourself a good legalistic husband?
Yeah. But, and I think part of the struggle was going to a private school where my graduating class was 5 people. The people that you get to choose to hang out with is very slim. We're hanging out, we're friends because that's all your options are. And then we went to this church that was very relationship based, but in a legal way. So every week, what are the 3 people you're praying for? Who are the 5 people you're inviting to church? And how many people are you in your small group? And you have 12, and very legalistic in that way. And so I built all these relationships in a church setting, but they were all based on legalism, and we're only really hanging up because we have Jesus in common and not really anything else. And then when we moved to Michigan and we started hanging out with everyone on the podcast, it was different. It was like, we have a choice to do this. And then we were given the choice to no longer come to this church because we actively closed it. And then we still found ourselves hanging out with Austin in this basement, and there was just this drive to be we want this, we want these relationships. And so I think that was really meaningful for me to have that choice and to continue hanging out with people who love Jesus, but could talk about other things as well.
You had the choice to drink the Kool-Aid.
And now I have the choice to make it.
When I started, when we started Epic Nation Ministries, and I was trying to be witty on the website, I actually said this is not a Kool-Aid distribution point.
Ooh.
You can bring your own Kool-Aid, but this is not where we distribute it.
Noted.
Does anything kind of ring similar in any of your lives, or did you experience something completely different?
I did not go to church to find a man.
Well, I have one thing that I mainly that made me want to do this podcast was a conversation that David and I were having the other day about how there's this is something that I'm curious to ask you, Us, and if you feel that it comes from this, but I was saying how I never really related to the whole angry God lens, or like the you can't ask questions in church lens concept, or like you can't ask questions of leadership, or you can't question things lens that we talk about sometimes, that I didn't really ever relate to that. And David said, well, that might be coming from a Baptist background. And I'm curious if you think that that has anything to do with denominational stuff, or because that's something I was thinking about. Like every denomination probably has certain lenses that they come from. And it's really interesting to me to see like the differences of where we come from.
I would say so. In my experience with Baptist, or kind of Bible non-denominational, that's how I grew up, was essentially was Baptist. That you do have the culture of, if it's a biblical question or like a historical fact question, or maybe even in some ways an interpretation question, by all means ask it, right? Versus there's other denominations where no, we know exactly what we believe. There are no questions. We have those answers. Those questions have already been answered, done. And so I think in kind of those more Bible, what I would call the Bible thumpers, you do have a question culture around that, but you do not have a question culture around morality or social questions, right? So it's interesting, so, well, what about homosexuality, or what about, Democrat or Republican or whatever, you just, no, we don't have questions there. So I think every denomination, in my experience, and I've worked in 6 different denominations professionally, I think everyone has certain things that they absolutely say, yeah, no Kool-Aid here, man. We're just totally question everything. This is beautiful. God's big. And then you like hit their particular batch of touch-me-nots that if you ask questions there, then you're of the devil, right? Or you're backsliding or whatever. So yes and no. And knowing you, Christina, obviously, I think in my observation, a lot of your questions were probably around the biblical interpretations and kind of the stuff of that nature, to where you were probably in a denomination that embraced that, whereas others, nope. We like the Catholic denomination, by and large, like they literally don't encourage their people to read the Bible at all, because that's the priest's job. Right, it's the priest's job to interpret for you and stuff like that. So, it's just the different cultures.
Right. Yeah, I think honestly, though, it wasn't really my denomination, but more just so my church is just a cool church, like with cool people that are just, I feel like they're pretty open. I don't know. But overall, I think more than anything, my spiritual lenses probably came from my family more than my church. To some extent from the community I grew up in. I grew up in a conservative Christian community. But I think, probably my lenses more came from my family, and particularly from, one of my lenses, for example, was the concept of, and this, I guess, could stem somewhat from the denomination, because our denomination was Mennonite. And so they come from somewhat of a martyr background. And so I always had this feeling of like this martyr mindset of, it was so honorable to consider, you would do anything for God, anything, give your life, anything. And if you weren't at that level, like, do you even care about God? Like, is that even, and like how even just suffering in general, I feel like is a subconscious mindset in that type of community that, and I mean, I don't have a lot of experience in other Christian communities, so I don't know if it translates a lot, but from my experience,
it's kind of exalted in a sense.
It's, suffering for God is like a exalted type. It's subconscious. I don't think people would necessarily say it, but if you if you are not suffering for God, then you're just too worldly, probably. Or like, and also I do feel like this was maybe more of a past mindset. It's definitely something that I grew up with. I don't feel like it's so much that way anymore, but it's definitely something that I've had to deal with a lot previously, is just the whole concept of dying to yourself, taking up your cross daily, just really, really embracing any sort of suffering you can get your hands on to some extent, like, because that's for God. Like, I don't know. That's something that was definitely one of my lenses that I came from.
How do you feel now? Like, do you feel you don't still see that?
No, not at all. Like, I don't definitely embrace the Jesus came so that we could have life and have it abundantly. That's pretty much what I embrace now. And it was for freedom that he set us free and all that, And
all those verses.
Yeah. The stuff that's not that noble, I guess.
You're a hedonist.
Enjoying life. How selfish are you?
I
I don't even know you anymore.
I know I grew up kind of bouncing between churches. I think it depended on where we lived. We were pretty rural. And so my younger years, I remember a Lutheran church, and then we went to a Methodist church, and then back to a Lutheran church, and then a Methodist church. And honestly, at that young age, the only difference I could tell you is that, the Lutheran churches had gold pews, and the Methodist churches had red pews. And obviously I wasn't at an age or a knowledge base where I could tell you, which Bible story I was getting fed in Sunday school. Eventually, went to a couple different Bible camps over the summers, and we ended up at a non-denominational church at some point. And I was like, oh, I love this place because they sing the same songs. And it became or the same songs that I was singing at camp, if that clarifies that, sorry. Mm-hmm. And it became really interesting to me when I was, partly when I became more spiritual, one of the big, things that pushed towards that was when I was in boot camp, and I was Marine Corps boot camp, and I was told I would be able to do something. And then when I went to do it, they said, oh no, shut up, go away. We don't do that in boot camp. And it's basically changing jobs. And so I didn't know how, I realized at that point I was going to pray for it, but I didn't know how to pray. It was funny because I was literally made the lay person for our platoon for Protestants, which I raised my hand for because I was like, oh, I'm not Catholic. And they all raised their hands. And on my dog tags it said Christian other because I didn't know at that point what I was. And still didn't really know what Protestant was. But anyways, and then I was like the choir person for it because there had to be somebody for it. So I got pegged as both the lay person and the songbird, as they called it. And so I'm handing out New Testaments. Like, I know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. People are coming to me, hey, my mom died, or my grandma died, or something like that. I'm like, this book's pretty good. Just hand them the whole New Testament because I had no idea what I was doing. And I would go to bed at night and pray because I thought that's what I was supposed to do to garner favor with God. And the only prayer I knew was the Lord's Prayer. That's the only one that I knew besides that and grace that we would say before dinner. I didn't know that you could just talk and have a conversation or just listen. And it was interesting. I was so open at that point in my life. Like at that point I had a Mormon bunkmate, and I don't know if I told him or he sensed that I was just like searching. And so one night, he just passed down his Book of Mormon, and I was like, all right, let's check this thing out. And I started reading it, and as much time as I had, which didn't have much time at all, but I handed it back at some point. And I remember asking God, hey God, if this is the way you want me to go, let me know. I'll do it. I mean, I really don't know what else is going on otherwise. And but I'm looking for a sign. And the next day was literally the worst day of my life. I was like, noted. That's enough for me. It started from literally the second I woke up, it was just the worst. Like they call you online into formation, and the guy that was in the bottom bunk was just being super slow, and so it was preventing me from getting onto online in the formation in time. And we all had to redo it. Like the whole platoon had to redo that portion of waking up in the morning because I was not getting on there on time. But I physically couldn't go through the person in front of me. And so I'm getting chewed out by my drill instructors. I'm getting, like, everybody in the platoon is getting pissed off at me because I'm not getting it done in time. And then I'm getting frazzled. We formed up to go somewhere. It was, super early, super dark. I couldn't find my flashlight that we're all supposed to have, like, pinned to us, like, marching idiots that we were at the time. And it just but I took that as my sign that Mormonism wasn't the way to go. So that's the deep dive research I did into that.
Wow.
And then I met Jen's family, and where half the family is pursuing the Latter-day Saints, or however they've rebranded at this point. I think they're actually going with something else.
Oh, I don't know.
Is it just the Church of Mormon? I don't know.
No, they don't like to say Mormon. They like to say Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Whatever, yeah. They like to identify with the rest of the Christian population.
Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, it was deep. It was super deep. I mean, to get some kind of closure to that story, on a cool note, it was I was keeping a little journal as much as I could through this time, through that boot camp's like 13 weeks, 3 months, whatever. And the Monday before graduation, I ended up getting my job changed, and I was told I could choose whatever I wanted. So I chose whatever I wanted, and then I was able to, to eventually request where I wanted to go. That's where I ended up meeting you. So it worked out all right.
The question is, were you reading the Bible the night before that happened?
For
sure.
I think there was promise to read the Bible later if I was granted my wishes.
All right.
And the cool thing was keeping that journal. I was able to see all the weird things that shouldn't have happened but did happen. And so it's cool to see, just even at that point, focusing on what I wanted and what I was attracting it even then. Even out, it was cool.
No, it's not the law of attraction. It's the genie.
Your words, not mine. I was going for vending machine Jesus.
Versus Batman Jesus, like David.
Speaking of that train of thought, that was another mindset I definitely grew up with, or lens.
Batman Jesus.
That God controlled. Well, no, not Batman Jesus. That God controlled everything, which was always, if you don't stop to think it out, it seems like, okay, it makes sense. Because how could God just let stuff happen? But at the same time, God's also loving and all these different things, and like it doesn't mesh at all. God doesn't want you to sin, but yet he basically set it up so you would sin if he's actually controlling everything. So yeah, that was one of the mindsets that I grew up with. That, well, if it happens, it was just meant to be. If it doesn't happen, it wasn't meant to be. So it gives you a very passive role in your life, I guess. Basically.
That's funny because that was like one of the hardest things for me when I was praying was, okay, you have to make sure to say, if it's your will.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so dumb because you're at the same time that you're like in a passive mode, you're also in the striving mode, but like bumping up against a wall that you can't really win. Like, that's just yucky to think about for me.
Those are some of the magic words, though. Like, if it's your will in your name, like if I say those actual words, then I've done it right.
Vada Kedavra.
It's so contrary, though, to like real life. Because if you think about like with a child, you're not telling them to do everything. You're saying, do you want to wear the blue shirt? You want to wear the red shirt? Do you want to eat macaroni? Do you want to eat a grilled cheese sandwich? And we're giving them all these choices. And then by the time they're in high school, it's like, well, or, what college do you want to go to? What career do you want to pursue? And all of a sudden we have these opportunities to make choices. But then when we put our spiritual hat on, it's like, well, I have to drink my milk the whole time. I don't get to choose what I want to do. Or if it's your will, I got to check in every time. But then as adults, we're not checking in every time with our parents. Well, hopefully we shouldn't be. with making life choices, you get this point where like you are an adult, go make choices, and we don't do that with our spiritual hat.
I do.
Well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that a lot. I should say it's a common practice if you attend churches for some people to do that. Maybe not necessarily everybody in this group, but I would love to hear more, Kat, about how you make choices.
It was just supposed to be an easy segue, but that's okay. I guess I feel like we just talked about this on NAC, but my spiritual path has always been very, I guess the best word that I've found to describe it is organic. I did grow up in a Christian church by a mom that was a Reformed Catholic, so we had to go to church or we would go to hell. So you don't miss church. And I always hated that. I was like, how does that even work? And then going and listening into the church, to the sermon, and it being very law-based and very judgmental and kind of like the you suck, try harder message never resonated. Like when I was 15 is when I decided myself to have a personal relationship with God instead of just going because I had to. And then from there, it's been very, very spirit-led. And when Christina was talking about the martyr mindset of Mormonism, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that's what that was. But not the suffering part. I don't think we need to suffer to do God's work, but to make yourself available to Him and what His plan, like, I mean, He has a plan. You don't have to do it. You can do whatever you want, and He would still love you. You'd still be valid. You'd still be perfect. But I've made the choice since I was a kid. And I like re-up my my commitment like yearly. I'm like, dude, whatever you want me to do. I do call God dude, I guess. Whatever you want me to do, be clear about it. Let me know what it is and I will do it. Like, I don't care if it sucks. I don't care if it's scary. I don't care if it's hard. Just let me know the thing and I will go do it. And yeah, you kind of have to be careful what you wish for sometimes. Because the past season of my life has been like, wow, I didn't realize this was on the table. That's cool. But finding joy, like even in that suffering, even in the seasons that are suffering, like finding joy in the fact that I did choose to do what Spirit asked me to do. And I'm doing it, even though it's hard. There's still satisfaction for me, and that it is a choice. Like, that's a choice I made, that I wanted to live my life as being Spirit-led. As far as beliefs in church and stuff now, after meeting where we did at North Point Church, when they started delving into like the spiritual giftings and what we kind of should be able to do as humans, kind of unlocked a lot of things for me. And then obviously Austin's basement and Austin's Kool-Aid. But the things that he presented was definitely a permission to look into the things that had always been in me and had always been in my heart, and curiosities that I had had about other modalities and things that other people would do. I have like this spiritual radar is how I reference it. And Spirit will kind of like introduce things on the outskirts of it when it's just like, hey, I just want you to know that this thing exists. I'm like, okay, cool. And then like eventually it like gets more and more prominent until it's right in the center. And then that's when I know that I'm at a place in my journey to look into that or start studying it or move forward with it or whatever. So yeah, with Austin's teachings, definitely gave me the freedom to look into all sorts of weird shit. And it was really good. And I feel more complete. And like you guys know, it got really weird, but it's good. Like crystals and hippie stuff and like ritual and Christians, like they need an explanation, like the open-minded ones, like, well, what do you mean ritual? Like, it's exactly what you think it means, Pam. Like
Karen.
Karen.
But finding validity and finding parts of our own inheritance as sons of God in these things, in the zodiac, in ritual, in all of these things, that it's our birthright, having the freedom to do that. I want to formally thank Austin Fletcher for that freedom. It's all his fault, you guys. So
I do feel the need to say when you said North Point Church, like it's not like the Andy Stanley North Point that like a lot of people are probably aware of, but just a little churchita in northern Michigan.
There was like 20 people in it.
Traverse City.
Traverse City.
And there was no affiliation whatsoever with any of the other North Points in existence.
Are they bad?
No, there's just some really big ones. There's like a huge one in Chicago and Atlanta and one in Florida. And so, yeah.
They didn't Google the name first before they picked it?
No church names anymore.
No. That sounds godly.
There's probably a church called Original Church. I mean, this is
Probably.
Original Church.
I wonder if they believe in original sin.
right. Well, you're welcome, and I'm sorry.
You better be.
That's so my initial hook was a quote from Morpheus from Matrix, to give proper credit where credit is due, and the red pill blue pill analogy. If you've never seen Matrix, which I don't know, you guys know Kayleen Hale, she had never seen it, and so all of those references to red pill, like she never understood it. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, how's this movie always been here?" And I had no clue. Anyway, so I've considered myself kind of a full-time red pill dispensary, and not a blue pill dispensary, just for the record.
Sorry, Matt.
Well.
Comes around, comes around.
I guess for me, the when I think about spiritual journey, I can't. Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna roll right over that.
Right, please.
But when I think about spiritual journey, I can't help but think of, if someone were to ask me, okay, Austin, all of this stuff, all of this journey that you've been on, can you define it in just one basic overview? And it is simple. When Jesus meets Nicodemus, John chapter 3, John says, "All right, dude, we know you're obviously sent from God. Tell me what I must do to inherit eternal life." And Jesus says, "You must be born again to see the kingdom of God." And then Nicodemus says, "I don't understand. Is it possible for a man to enter into his mother's womb again?" Jesus ignores his question and says, "And you must be born of water and of spirit to enter the kingdom of God." And so spiritual journey immediately throws me to this process that Jesus lays out. You must be born again to see the kingdom. You must be born of water and of spirit to enter the kingdom. And so it is literally the reality that nobody told me when I was born again that was step one. Nobody told me that was the beginning. As a matter of fact, everyone told me that was the end. That all of your journey led to this finish line. In reality, when you're talking about spiritual truth, at least Christian spiritual truth, and I would argue that Jesus did not start Christianity. Jesus was simply a teacher and the logic made flesh, to the point where you can find truth in any religion. And any religion and any spiritual truth will tell you that there is a process. Now, Jesus, and I think the Bible is the best at laying it out, and you can go to newagechristianity.org and find out what I mean by all of this stuff. But point being is, it is a journey, and being born again is literally the beginning. And I found that out. I was 25. It was 2007 that I found out that being born again was just the beginning. And so for me, my spiritual journey really is about red pill after red pill after red pill. It is waking up from a one way of being and being born again. It is Neo coming out of the Matrix and waking up to the real reality. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the dual matrix theory, that the first matrix is for the majority, and then those who reject the programming, like Neo, they wake up, but in reality, Zion is just another matrix. And and that it's a fake wake up, and that they're still in Matrix, which is why Neo was able to stop the machines in the third one, because he's still in the Matrix. He just doesn't know it. And anyway, so it's just the idea of like, so you wake up from one Matrix to find yourself in another Matrix, to find yourself in another Matrix, because you are born of God, you were born of water, you were born of spirit. And the reason is because you are a three-part being. You are a spirit, you are a soul, and you are a body. And so the wake-up call and the journey is not just one-dimensional. And so for me, it has been 100% to become the cartographer of that map. What is it to articulate to humanity the different pieces of being born again, and again? And that my journey it's been my life. And like I said, I mean, you go New Age Christianity, and you will see this isn't, there is so much that we have talked about as a community that you guys know that still isn't represented on that platform, because it is just the pardon my French, but the bullshit that the world has put on top of the reality of spirit. Quantum physics is now, I think, doing the best job out of any system. Quantum physics is literally taking, dump truck loads of the shit off of the truth, because we're starting to realize that we are one. We're starting to realize that that you can be seated in heaven and on earth at the same place. You can, just all of these quantum physical realities are starting to realize that the spiritual mumbo jumbo, the religious mumbo jumbo that we've been handed, is just burying the truth. And I love what quantum physics is doing, because it is unveiling the simplicity and yet the magnificence of spiritual realities that, humanity's always known. We have always known who we really are. We've just been, we didn't, one of the recent things that I remember, I think I was talking to you and Dom at Dom's house, just saying, like, immortality is our natural state. It's not something we have to go find. We always have it. We've always had it. What we put on top of it was death, right? We actually put on death. So we don't have to go find immortality. We just have to get rid of death and defeat, and so there's just so many things that we have as our natural way of being that we have piled on top of and piled on top of and piled on top of. And so my journey has been one of literally shoveling shit. And as I find the truth underneath, getting a pack of red pills and handing it out to whoever will swallow it. And it's it is been really, I've been disowned by more people than I think more people have told me I'm of the devil than people who've told me I'm of God. But I don't care anymore. Like it's until somebody starts, until the universe gets what it is longing for as manifested sons of God, as people who literally are the physical presence of God in the universe. Until that happens, I don't mind looking like a fool. I don't mind being wrong, and there's a bravery to just, hey, I might get it wrong, but I'm gonna try, because somebody's got to crack this code. Somebody's got to understand that this thing that every human feels of, there is a perfection that is possible. There is a way of being that we have missed out on, and everyone wakes up in the morning and they want tomorrow to be better than today was. What is that? It is a pursuit of something that we know is instinctively supposed to be, and we have lost, and we have buried it under the piles of shit. And so until somebody cracks that code and unburies the whole treasure, I'm going to do whatever that is that the Spirit has asked me to do. And that goes right into what Kat was talking about. Just, you don't have to become a soldier in the army of God in order for God to love you. Like, you can absolutely create the life you want, and there is a beauty to a white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and a dog. And that being life and life abundantly. And if that is you, and you don't feel like you have a calling, you don't feel like you have a passion, everything like that, awesome, because you are God in the flesh, and God needs that kind of joyful experience. And yet there are others who are warriors, and there are others who are going to push into things, and there is no condemnation for either group. But that is a life that I know I've chosen as well, as Kat mentioned. And I think most of the people on this call would put themselves in that category. But I've talked way too long, so I'm going to now hand it over to Batman.
Go, Batman.
It's kind of funny that you were talking about that. I guess you can call it innate calling or innate feeling or whatever whatever it is, because I think that's always been with me my whole life. I grew up in Latin America. Latin America was largely Catholic. My mom came from a Catholic, nominally Catholic family. Catholicism in Latin America has been influenced a lot by why can I never think of this concept? Superstition.
I was going for shrooms, but go.
Yeah, and so like that, I don't know if it was that spirit kind of got mixed into my life or whatever. Whatever you want to call it, but the whole thing of Jesus coming back was huge. And I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, just being there was this one song, and I don't know, I really think that there's a strange fascination with the rapture and all that. And there was this, I watched a movie, I'm thinking it was Thief in the Night, maybe, I don't know, and then there was this one song on the radio, and it was just like a song. The kid is like, mom, where's my brother, he's gone, and I'm not, and I'm like, and I'm like, oh my word, this is horrible. Like, what is this crap? What if Jesus comes? And to be honest, I don't think I even understood at all what it was. I just knew that I had to be afraid of it, and so that was a thing. I would just lay there at night. I remember just, just worried and scared, and then there's a whole thing of like, I want to say my parents or my family or the church. It's probably the church more than anything. But my dad was a pastor. They were pastoring a church, but it was very Armenian, and the idea of Armenianism is that you can lose your salvation. Mm. And so that coupled with the rapture, and I was like, oh shit, Jesus is going to come back, and I forgot to ask forgiveness for that one sin, and so I was going to stay here because I didn't ask for forgiveness, and I went to sleep and I didn't ask for forgiveness, and in the morning nobody's around, and I'm, and that was like literally my life. I went to a private school, and it was a Baptist school, and there was a whole lot of that, the rapture. And I remember a number of times having speakers come, and the mark of the beast was going to be like this, and then the Antichrist, and then whatever. And I actually read all of the Tim LaHaye Left Behind books.
Oh yeah.
So did the whole US pretty much, huh?
Right. You read all of them?
It's like they're
anyways,
like 8, right?
Information about
there's a ton. There's like 11 actually.
Well, they got the concept down anyway.
But anyways, so that was my whole life, and it was a mixture of, okay, there's got to be something better than this. This doesn't make sense. Why would God be vastly inconsistent? And there was almost like a thing of where if you wanted to be a Christian, you kind of had to have this a bit of a leap of faith, and put your logic aside and jump across and then see if we can try to grab it back, or jump over this place, and then once you got to the other side, then you kind of could start using logic again. But from here to there, you just kind of, there's nothing there, and so it was kind of like, yeah.
I thought the logic was that
I just didn't even.
God's mind is higher than ours, and you'll know.
That's not logic. There's no logic there.
Well,
finish the verse.
Blind acceptance.
Finish the verse.
So that was kind of it for me. I just never, I would, you kind of cringe when you hear somebody trying to argue logically but using the Bible, because you're immediately. Yeah.
Who says
anyways,
the Bible?
they have to accept the Bible, or else why are you even making that point? And so anyways, so that was, I just kind of like, it was just too confusing, and I just didn't really try, and that was.
You didn't try to make sense of it, you mean?
I didn't try to make sense of it. I didn't try to be I was a
good person.
No, you're a good person, but I mean, if you think about it, like that whole thing with like integrity and stuff like that, I didn't really. It was just kind of like, it is what it is,
It's funny because when I hear people say that they would pray every night when they went to bed, like to try to repent of all their sins or whatever, I was like, how would you? Like the concept
Dear
of
God.
No. No, I mean, like,
forgive everything that I did today.
So one of my lenses.
If I forgot something that I didn't.
Okay, so if you forgot something. Okay, I guess that part. But I was gonna say, like, one of my lenses was that you could never possibly be holy. Like, you were always going to be sinning somehow that you just couldn't even, like,
and
recognize.
Then on top of that, you have the whole concept of Christianity that you're a piece of shit and God is so much higher than you are.
You've really adopted that word this podcast.
Yeah. No, that was Austin. He said it like 10 times. I've only said it once.
I did.
No, you've said it multiple times.
No, how many times have I said it?
I don't know, David. I think we're holding this
one.
one.
I'm a swear jar, David.
You owe me.
So anyways, like we're so below and he is so much higher, and so we just don't understand anything.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Go forth.
I'm just
You want to finish the verse?
I want to finish the dang verse. Technically, it finished the dang paragraph, but
yeah.
This is a quote from the Old Testament. But just as it is written, things which eye has not seen, ear has not heard, and which have not entered into the heart of man, all that God has prepared for those who love him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 10, says, "For to us God revealed them through the Spirit. For the Spirit searches all things, even the depths of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of the man which is in him? Even so, the thoughts of God no one knows except for the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, so that we may know the things freely given to us by God, which things we also speak, not in words taught by human wisdom, but those taught by the Spirit, combining spiritual thoughts with spiritual words."
Preach.
So he's literally making the case that the old way was nobody understood God, but now because we have the Spirit of God, we can actually know the mind of God. So,
and that's where the dichotomy has got to be, that we have the Spirit and yet we continue to think in the crappy way. And so, because I always had it in my heart. I was like, there's got to be a better way than this, but I never sought it out, in a sense. I never thought that it was possible to find. And so, like, there was always that in my heart, and I think it was in both our hearts, especially like with church and stuff. There's got to be something more than this. There's got to be a way that makes sense.
Well, basically, just the whole thing of, if you don't see the fruit that you're supposed to be seeing, you don't see the works that you're supposed to be seeing. Like, something's missing So what is that? And what, not to mention just like, I feel like all of the lenses.
I think it's the works though. I think it's the life. Like, where is the life in the Christianity that you live, unless you are artificially stoking those flames and making yourself like goofy happy all the time and just acting that way? Because the way that we understand Christianity, or the way that I understood Christianity, did not bring life. It brought condemnation. And I mean, now the way that you think of it, well, duh, you were living under a self-imposed law. And if you performed, then you had the right to feel better. If you didn't perform, then, you had to pray for 10 minutes at night, before going to bed, going to sleep. And so like, the place where that all just shifted was was kind of funny, because we were going to that Spirit and Truth conference, and Christina told me, hey, check this guy out. And we watched Jonathan Welton's Rapture list, and that whole concept, I remember just sitting there and thinking, wait a minute, so what does this mean? If Jesus isn't coming back.
Oh, don't say that.
What?
That's horrible.
If Jesus already came back?
Oh, okay.
Well, okay, yes. I mean,
that's
as
the
in,
premise
like,
of the book, right? Raptureless.
Yeah.
No, rapture, like the rapture is when everybody gets
Well, actually,
translated to heaven.
yeah. So, I mean, Jesus came back, but there isn't a quote-unquote rapture.
Okay.
Welton would say Jesus does have one last return in the future.
True that.
Yes.
Is that here?
Yeah, that's our car.
Oh, okay. It's loud. Jesus, get out of it. No. He's driving
It wasn't
our
the
car.
trumpet.
Tell us about Raptureless and what you were thinking about that.
Well, I mean, for one, I knew a little bit of history, and it all made sense.
Nice.
And I was like, whoa.
Like Bible history or like other history?
Like that kind of history of that he was talking about.
Yeah, but nobody knows that.
I'm trying.
So go read it. Go read the book.
Yeah. Okay, so just read it.
Actually.
If you care.
Well, I mean, I
Buy the book on theepoch.org.
There
That's
we
right.
go.
There you
Yes. Perfect.
There's probably videos on there too.
Yeah. So anyways, so that concept really changed really just kind of derailed the old way of thinking. And it opened up my mind and my way of looking at life and seeing it as a freedom, not like a thing that you're just going to fall out of God's hand, if you don't perform. And you can study all these things, and all these things can fit together in a way that benefit you. And one of the things that I really like, I really dig, I really like, is the thought that or that saying that you guys have all the time, chew the meat, spit out the bones, that whole you can study something and it doesn't necessarily, it can be transactional. It doesn't have to stick with you. In other words, you're not going to get a demon from studying the Quran, or you're not going to get a demon from doing this or that or whatever. And before, my life was just all about that. Don't study this because you can get that. Don't read that because you can get that. So, anyways.
One thing about Spirit and Truth 2016 that I thought was really cool is that, yes, we had Welton there, but we also had Dr. Lynn Hiles there too, and he preaches that message that Welton teaches really well. And to have them both there, it was, I don't know how much prior to that conference it was for us to have heard that message, but it was also a turning point for me as well. I had kind of placed end times theology in this box of like, hey, doesn't matter right now, man. I've got stuff to do now. I've got work here to do now, and I'm going to focus on that. I mean, just to back it up a little bit, like I think early in my life, I've been kind of driven by fear and guilt when it came to spirituality, and then that kind of transitioned into a sense of fear and gratitude. And then it transitioned to a desire to understand this world, and then to understand, what I could do with the freedom that I have. And that was, hearing that message, understand that the world wasn't coming to an end as I had understood it, was huge for me.
I would agree. It's very freeing when you don't have to live in fear, because you might be in the middle of, I don't know, Jesus coming back. So you never know when your last moment is, or that kind of thing. Or what if I don't make it and then I'm stuck on the earth for 7 terrible years? Like, yay. But yeah, there's that freedom and that hope for the future.
I think there's a lot of people that also have a high value for the historical record of, I know my younger brother's one of them. He'd be like, look, every generation kind of thinks they're smarter than all the other generations, right? And there's certain people that are like, look, no, if they're not teaching in universities, there's a reason, right? Because enough of the smart people have said it's not true. And so there is that classification of people that value kind of that credentials-based understanding. And if you're one of those people, let me tell you that for 1,800 years, out of the last 2,000, that one of the few things that every denomination, the Eastern Orthodox, the Catholic, and the Protestant movements, those 3 major Christian groups, one of the few things they all agreed upon was preterism. And that Jesus' prophecies in Matthew 24 and that the book of Revelation, everything, that was all fulfilled in 70 AD when Jerusalem was destroyed by Rome. The temple was destroyed. There's never been another high priest. There's never been another sacrifice. That the age of Moses and that the Jewish world came to an end. So literally the end of the world. And so,
on top of that, there isn't a way that it can come back either.
Right. Yeah. You can't have a Jewish system. If they rebuild the temple and all that, any high priest that they appoint would already break their own rules, because you have to be able to prove the lineage, and there is none. Right. So the Romans burnt it. Anyway, so if you're one of those that actually values like the kind of the academia of understanding, that is, preterism is even more academically sound than the rapture or futurism. It's just in Western Christianity, it's been largely taken over. And I would ask, regardless of the academia, regardless of the point, I think it's interesting that we're doing our spiritual journey. And I think this particular thing about the removal of this rapture, future end times, apocalypse is upon us thing is important for all of us for one big reason is when you don't have hope for a future, when a group of people known as Christians who are supposed to be the light of the world don't have vision for the future, then you get what we have gotten. You get a world where the light is sequestered in buildings on street corners. And why would I need to run for president when it's supposed to go to Satan anyway? And he's supposed to get, I should just do what I can to help make that go faster. Right. And so I've literally known people who voted for certain presidents because they thought it was the faster route to Jesus. Like, seriously. They knew it was the wrong person. They knew it was the wrong choice. And they did it because in their mind, they truly believe that the faster we go to hell, the sooner Jesus comes back.
Yeah.
Like, that is the value of the belief in your future. That you would actually go against the things you believe to be right and good because your view of the future says this is the better choice. Like, so I think it's one of the major things for all of us that in this kind of revamping of what we all grew up with the apocalypse and all of this stuff, and realizing, wait a minute, if we're not going anywhere, if it's not about going to heaven, but it's about bringing heaven here, then suddenly you have a completely different view of existence and purpose and why. And I think that is absolutely, and I've done episodes on that at NAC. I know this is not the first time we've talked about this on this podcast, but it is a big freaking deal. Mm-hmm. And that is because you don't realize it, but what you think about the future is arguably the most influential thought on your choices for today. And when that is one of the predominant thoughts, is that there is no future and that Satan's supposed to take over, imagine all of the decisions you've made based on that stupid thought. And I'm gonna say it's stupid because you just look at the life that it has robbed from you, mm-hmm. and you will also realize, wow, that really is stupid. So,
that was a big part of, like, I grew up, my mom would watch Jack Van Impe. Yep. Or something, and he would talk about end times all the time and the mark of the beast and stuff like that. And I was like 10, and I'm sitting there and like deer in headlights. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so that was a big fear. Like, I was really afraid of the end times and aliens when I was a kid. But I kind of lived the majority, like half, I would say, of my adult life believing that the world was going to end. And so it is really stupid, and the life that did rob from me, and even like the first half of me raising up my child, like believing that the world was going to end. So it was just kind of like, I don't know, for myself personally, I didn't learn instruments that I felt like learning, because what the fuck's the point? It was really dumb. It was really amazing to see how pervasive and like all-consuming one belief could be, and how much it did affect my life. Feeling like I don't know, like what's the point? Like, not in a depressive way. Like, I still followed spirit, and like my spiritual journey has always been like the most important thing to me, and the thing that I'm a focus on most. But yes, that was a huge bag of bullshit that wasted so much time.
Mm-hmm.
So. I think it's really interesting too how our current beliefs cause us to more easily dismiss evidence that is contrary to them. And so you have people writing books, like I might get the years wrong here, but like 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1988, which was like, it sold, a ton of copies. And then 89 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1989. This went on to for 5 years or so, and it kept selling a ton of books. Like at some point,
I think they did from 88, 89, I think it was like 92, 94, 96, and then 2000. Like the same title, just different years.
You had a good approach then. You sold a lot of books.
I was going to say 2000 must have been totally a marketing thing.
Yeah, I don't know, but you get the point. Like, it was... Anyway, sorry, I interrupted, Matt.
No, that's all I had for that. I mean, we've been going for a hot minute though. It feels like it's gone quick, but maybe it's time to kind of get that last turn around the circle here. Anybody have any thoughts they didn't get to yet?
I think for me, at the end of the day, there's lots of things coming our way. We've got the Bible, we've got speakers, we've got experts. But to really know yourself and to check in with your spirit, and what is the Holy Spirit saying, and how does it line up with what God is showing you through your life, is where you should stand in your confidence and your faith in your personal journey. Or at least that's what I do in mine. So,
I think for me, this particular conversation has been a lot about Christianity, right? And it's been our spiritual journeys. And so clearly we're letting people get to know us, and that's us. But I think one of the overarching things that I have realized it's one of those things you realize years ago, and then it kind of becomes clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer, is that, no different than English Chinese, Russian, Italian, French, all these different languages. They are simply languages that cultures based on geography have created to communicate the same things that we all communicate. So, you can call this a glass in one language. You can call it I don't know what the word is in other language, but David, what's the word in Spanish
A glass.
Yeah.
Vaso? Like a drinking glass?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those syllables and that vibration for this thing that I'm holding up in the camera is just a glass. And in one language we call it a glass, and in another language we call it un vaso, in another language we call it a whatever. And it still means the same thing. And realizing that religion, by and large, that every person has experienced intuition. Every person has experienced what it is to have a dream that you feel like was more than just a random dream. Every person has experienced spiritual experiences, spiritual reality. And as cultures, what we have done is we've done our best to create a language and to create an explanation of it. Sure, some cultures have more insight into certain pieces than others, and some cultures have made up a massive amount of control-based bullcrap. And so I'm not saying that all religions are the same, and I'm not saying that they all go to the same thing. It's all just spokes to the same center of the same. No, I'm not saying that. There's certainly a value in comparing the different thoughts and comparing different religions. Yet in the end, what it does come down to is religion is nothing more than a language. And it is a language that each culture has created for the experiences that are true underneath them. That whether you're Chinese and you're Buddhist, or you're East Indian and you're Hindu, or you're Muslim, Christian, whatever, when you have a dream at night and it speaks of a particular thing, and you try to interpret everything, call it prophecy, call it foresight, call it omens, call it whatever, the language you use, how you interpret, the tools you use to interpret, all that stuff, it's all just us trying to figure out the truth that is truly behind it. And when I started to realize that, and I realized I'm very grateful for the tradition I grew up in, but it allowed me to see something bigger. And it allowed me to not feel like I'm going to get a demon if I David, as you're saying, you're going to get a demon if you read the Quran. No. I would actually argue, based on spiritual principles that I've learned, that if you believe you're going to get a demon, that's what actually gives you the demon. Right? And if you believe that you won't, right? Be it so unto you according to your faith. So this is largely a Christian discussion, but for those of you who aren't in that tradition, this is a group of people, I feel like I'm speaking from all of us, in that there's an openness to truth and spiritual reality, that we are not obsessive over what words you use and what language you use. We use English because we all speak English, right? One of us speaks another language very fluently as well. But you get the point. That Christianity and the Bible verses and Jesus is a bit different, but they're largely the language that we all grew up with. And that has been arguably the most illuminating aspect of my personal journey, is getting past the dogma that I was taught and learning how to respect and honor others and their journey. So there.
Follow that cat. Go.
Man, I got nothing. Some of the stuff that David touched on about believing that there was something more. I think I got sidetracked in my little, outburst of personal journey. But the stuff that I was learning in the church when I went, I was like, there's no way that's right. There's no way that God is going to strike me down for, anything, having that organic relationship with him. Touching on that a little bit, I knew him, I felt him, I've talked to him, I've walked with him. don't know. It just didn't sit right anymore. How much condemnation and stuff is brought into the church. And so while religion is a language that we're trying to explain or be able to communicate the truth behind it, there's a lot of really heavy condemnation and law and control that has been overlaid on that in the years.
Mm-hmm.
That is bullshit. So so I stopped going to church, and I feel a lot closer to God, just in the ways that I find him. And not that I am suggesting you stop going to church if you're happy there, but there is definitely more. There is definitely more. And I found a lot of it. There's still so much more out there, but I'm going to keep going, I guess. Not talking, spiritual journeying. I'm done. The end.
I guess my biggest thing, I think, in my personal relationship with God has been when I was at the point where I was done not knowing answers, and I needed to start finding answers, and I devoted myself, all of my time to that, essentially. At that point, God pretty much just said to me, don't compare yourself and your journey to anyone else's journey. You don't know, in circumstances that you see, you don't know all the details, and you don't need to use those experiences that other people have, or even some of the experiences that you have that you don't necessarily understand. You don't need to take that as truth. Truth is in my word, and you can find it there, and you can find it in your relationship with me, and you can trust me, and just don't compare, because you don't know all the details that you think that seems to be the case or whatever. Because my desire was always very much to know the truth and to find the truth and get to the root of things. But that's not always, I feel like, something that he's going to grant to me in someone else's life. Like, I need to focus on my own journey. And so sometimes letting circumstances that someone else experiences be okay for them, and it doesn't have to inform my truth or whatever, or my understanding of truth. And yeah, I don't know. That's just been, I guess, the guiding thing for me, is not comparing myself and not comparing other people's experiences.
You're here.
Me?
Yeah.
I'm good.
Oh.
All right. Well, for me, to brag for a second, I've read the Bible several times.
Brownie points.
But I also haven't read it lately. It's been a large transition for me to go from the written word to simply listening, listening for the voice. And I think I mentioned it in the previous podcast, how when we moved to Michigan to start a church, had this plan put in place, and then being away from church leadership for the first time in my I would say my hardcore Christian life, it was freeing, and I just allowed myself just to listen, to be outside of hearing somebody tell me how it's supposed to be and how it should look. Just having that time to listen was really, really influential, and it changed a lot, and it led us to where we are now, and still working out how to share that with our kids, and bring them to a point where they feel like, the voice that they can hear, like they can hear it too, the voice that mom and dad hear, and get beyond that point of like, well, hey, you usually are affiliated with a religion that is dominant in the place of the world that you live. So, like Austin said, like having that honor for people that are growing up in completely different scenarios, and knowing that their spiritual experience is just as valid, but our language is different. I don't know. It's been a fun process. Like I'm currently in that process where I talked about earlier of like interval training. I'm consolidating right now. I'm walking it out and seeing how things go and kind of matching things up with what I see, with what I believe. And it's been a great process. I wouldn't trade it at this point. But that said, I hope in the last hour or so that you had a chance to get to know us better, that maybe you found something that you could relate to in your journey, and know that, while all our journeys look different, they're still leading somewhere, and you're going to get to a place that you love at one point. So you can check out our blogs for this episode on theepoch.org, and we'll catch you next time.